Okay, we're going to continue talking about different body systems. We're moving on to the nervous and sensory systems. So all these fish have a brain and spinal cord. They do have external nares or nose holes in their snout that have the ability to smell or um, sense smells in the water. Salmon and lamprey use this. It's very fine-tuned for them so that they can return to the stream that they were spawned from. And it's because they're following a specific odor. It has a certain chemical makeup and they can find their way back. Their eyes do not have lids and they have round lenses. They can focus by moving the lens forward or backward so they can see that way. They do have an inner ear that helps them maintain equilibrium and balance, and they can hear. The structure is very similar to other vertebrates. Okay, so one of the important sense systems that fish have is a lateral line system. They have little sensory pits in their epidermis, and you'll be able to see it. It looks like a line along the back of the fish, and they are able to detect water currents and low frequency sounds. And then some fish have electroreception abilities, where they can detect the electrical field of a fish or other organisms. And this is very highly developed in rays and sharks. And just a little factoid about sharks' electroreception. I don't know how they figured this out, but they found out that sharks can't detect organisms wrapped in polyvinyl insulated sheets or bags. And so what they've done is once in a great while a plane will crash in the ocean, but they use this particular material on these aircrafts so that if a plane does crash, it gives the people inside a better chance for survival because the sharks don't detect them immediately. There are fish that can generate electric charges, and the currents can circulate from the electric organs in a fish's tail to electroreceptors near its head. An object in the field will change the pattern. It's kind of like the sounds that bats emit. They're using electricity in the water instead. And a lot of these fish live in murky waters, so they can't see very well. There's the electric eel. They can shock in excess of 500 volts, and then there's an electric ray that can pulse up to 50 volts. Okay, for excretion and osmoregulation, remember excretion deals with types of urine or metabolic waste, and then osmoregulation deals with the amount of water in their blood. So the kidneys and gills are going to be the main organs that help maintain the proper balance of electrolytes and water in their tissues. The nephrons you can find in the kidneys, and they help filter blood-borne nitrogen waste. They filter out ions, water, small organic compounds across a network of capillaries called the glomerulus. I'm not going to ask you that specific detail, but just understand the nephrons are found in the kidneys. Then the filtrate passes into a tubule system. The things that are important are absorbed back into the blood, and then anything that is considered waste will be excreted. The freshwater fish don't really need to drink water. They take in water when they're eating. They have nephrons with large glomeruli and short tube systems so that very little water is getting reabsorbed. They produce large quantities of dilute urine, and they have to use, their cells use active transport of ions to get salt, to keep the salt in their blood, because otherwise it would diffuse out. Marine fish have to combat water loss because there's more water in a fish's body than there is in the water surrounding them. And you can see there's about 3.5% ions in the environment, and about 0.65% ions in the fish's tissues. So water is going to want to move out of their cells through osmosis. So they will drink water, and they can eliminate the excess salt or ions in their excretions, defecating, and active transport in their gills. Their nephrons are going to be a little bit different than the freshwater fish. They're going to have smaller glomeruli and longer tube systems, so they can absorb more water. Okay, the elasmobranches can convert nitrogenous waste into urea in the liver. And then urea is stored in their tissues all over their body, and it's hyperosmotic to the seawater, so it's more salty than seawater. The shark tissues the same concentration of ions as in the seawater because of this. And they do have a rectal gland that removes excess salt from the blood, and it can excrete it into the cloaca, and then they can pass it out of their bodies. Then there are things called diadromous fishes. These are fish that have to be careful because they go between freshwater and saltwater environments, but their gills are capable of coping with taking in ions and secreting extra ions. So things like salmon and lampreys or freshwater eels, they go back and forth, and they have to be able to handle the changes in the amount of salt in the water. Okay, so there's different types of egg-laying definitions. And these will come up again because several of the classes that we'll be talking about in the vertebrates lay eggs. For example, you've got the fish, you've got amphibians, reptiles, and birds, and then there's one type of mammal that lays eggs. So these are terms that you should become familiar with. The first one is oviparous. This is actually going to be the most common type of egg laying because eggs are inexpensive to produce, and when they're laid in the water, there's moisture so they don't dry out. There's a lot of oxygen and nutrients in the water, so that's not a problem for the eggs either. But what happens with oviparous organisms, they lay undeveloped eggs. There is external fertilization about 90% of the time, or 90% of the fish do this. Once in a while there is internal fertilization with some sharks and rays. But the fish, because only a few of the eggs will survive to adulthood, the fish have to lay millions of eggs so that some of the offspring will survive. Then there's ovoviviparous, and this is where there's internal fertilization of these eggs, and then there's internal development as well. And this is advantageous because then the young have a chance to grow a little bit and become more advanced when they are born. And then there's viviparous. This is where it's internal fertilization. The baby gets direct nourishment from the mother, and then they are fully advanced at birth. And there's some sharks and surf perches that are born in this way. So this is the last slide. And if you missed something, please go back and re-watch, re-listen. I definitely do it before you take the test, and we'll see you soon.